Federal colonial homes are the youngest of all the colonial architectural styles, and although there are some very strong family resemblances between the federal and the colonial predecessors, it also has a style uniquely of its own. In this video, I'm going to be focusing purely on the federal colonial architectural style. I'll cover the history, the signature features, and how exactly you can spot a federal colonial. And don't forget to stick around to the end because there's a fun quiz to test how much you know. To understand federal colonials, we need to step back in time to post-revolutionary America from the late 1700s to the early 1800s. And as the newly independent America sought to establish its own identity, so too did the architecture start to evolve from the heavier, bulkier Georgian architecture into something lighter, refined and classically inspired, thanks to the growing trend of neoclassicism, both in Europe as well as in America. One of the biggest advocates of the movement was Thomas Jefferson, who loved the balance, the symmetry and the proportion of Greek and Roman architecture. And during his travels around Europe, he fell in love with the Palladian design and brought this back to America, a style rooted in the ideals of harmony and refinement. So Jefferson's influence massively shaped early American architecture, and it was the elements of restraint and balance which defined the federal architectural style. Now let's dive into how to recognize a federal colonial home, starting on the exterior. The first feature you'll notice is the balanced, symmetrical, rectangular facade. Now, this is something all colonial architectural styles have in common, but in contrast to the predecessor, the Georgian colonial, the federal is somewhat narrower and taller. It's just a bit more elegant, a bit more refined. It's a very subtle difference because they are closely related. If all the colonials were cousins, the Georgian and the federal would be siblings because they are very close. But the federal is just taller, sleeker, more elegant and more refined. The second exterior feature key to federal colonials was the brickwork, the red brickwork, and specifically the Flemish bond brick pattern. Now, the Flemish bond was quite unique in that they would alternate the header, which was the end of the brick, and the stretcher, which was the length of the brick. So this pattern would create this refinement, and sometimes the headers, the ends of the bricks, were burnt to give it a darker pattern. So this pattern was twofold. Number one, it created structurally a much stronger building, a much stronger wall. And secondly, the pattern was very refined and elegant, and it also showcased the homeowner's wealth because you would need skilled craftsmen and mason to be able to put this pattern together and build the house with a Flemish bond brick. Number three was the decorative front door. Federal colonials emphasized the entrance, particularly fanlights, so semicircular windows above the front door, and side lights were particular features of federal colonials. Later versions came with pediments, pilasters, porticos, but they were still more subtle than what you saw with the Georgian colonial. I think the important thing to remember with the federals is it tended to be a bit more localized on the front door rather than the whole entrance. Item number four is the windows. Now, just as the shape of the house from the Georgian to the federal has become narrower and taller, so too do the windows. We've kind of departed here from the Georgian squat 6/6 double hungs. Now, the windows with the federals are narrower, they're taller, almost like the European style we see with the French and Italian windows, definitely elongated. Often they were adorned with lintels or arch brickwork above the top. Now, the picture you're seeing here, these are very decorative lintels above these windows. That was kind of extreme. Usually they were a bit more subdued than this. Now, the final and possibly most significant exterior telltale sign of a federal colonial is the dentil course. Now, this is a strip or row of small rectangular blocks evenly spaced that goes underneath the roof line or around decorative cornices. It was decorative and understated, providing elegance without excessive ornamentation, all reinforcing the neoclassicism principles of refinement, balance and proportion. Now we've covered the outside, let's take a step inside. But firstly, if you're finding this useful, please like and subscribe, because it lets me know that this information is of value. And also let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If there's enough people from a specific geography, I thought it'd be really cool to do house styles from different parts of the world or different parts of the country. Feature number 1 on the inside, same as the Georgian Colonial, is the centre hall floor plan. So the front door would enter into a main entrance, and there were rooms on either side, the parlour on one side or the formal living room, and on the other side was the dining room. So the staircases, again, same as the Georgian Colonial, always in the centre of the house, but this time it's lighter, it's more delicate. The newels have intricate carvings on them. The space in the centre hall is lighter and brighter because the windows are bigger. So very similar, but again, just more refinement and more elegance. Feature number 2 on the inside of Federal Colonials are the refined mouldings and classical details. So you've got elements such as mouldings, wainscoting, decorative friezes, and just as we saw on the outside, you've got the fanlight above the main door. This is picked up and carried through on the inside as well. You would see fanlights above doors, transom windows to keep the daylight flowing and make it light and bright no matter where you were in the house. The third feature are fireplaces. They're still essential. We're still in the time before central heating, so fireplaces were found in most rooms of the house. Typically, you'd see just a simple carved wooden mantle. And what's interesting, if you look closely at this picture, you can see the dental course at the top of the fireplace. So the small row of teeth-like moulding, which is echoed from the exterior. Remember the dental course just under the roofline. Similarly, you can also see the brickwork has been brought inside as well. So the brickwork that surrounds the fireplace is another signature Federal Colonial feature. Depending on the wealth of the homeowner, you may have seen something more elaborate like this in later Federal Colonials, imported marble carved with a classic motif surround. Feature number 5 was ceiling medallions. Now, these had already appeared during the Georgian colonial period, but during the Federal, they just became so much more popular, and you'd see them in the parlour room, in the grand entrance, and in the dining room, adding a layer of refinement and classical elegance. Number 4 was the Palladian windows. And apologies, I think this would make more sense if it was with the exterior section rather than the interior, but I'm not going to change it now. So a Palladian window was a central arched window flanked either side by a smaller rectangular window. And if you remember, it was Thomas Jefferson's admiration of the Italian 16th century architect Palladio, which really popularized these Palladian designed windows in America and made them a signature feature of the Federal Colonial homes. The final interior feature of Federal Colonials is the colour palette. Now we see quite a departure from the Georgian heavy wood panelling everywhere. The Federal homes became lighter, brighter, and embraced a much lighter and more refined colour palette. You're starting to see soft beiges, muted pastels, pale greens, pale blues, altogether a lighter area, a more elegant feel. By now, you should have a great idea of what makes a Federal Colonial unique, both on the outside and on the inside. If this has been useful, please like and subscribe and check out my other videos. But now we're going to put your knowledge to the test. Here is a photo of a Federal Colonial house. If you turned up at this house to show your clients what are the features you would point out to them that identify this house as a Federal Colonial, and I need at least 3. So here are some things that you could have said. Number 1, it's made from the classic Federal Colonial red brick with the white trim. Secondly, it has the dental course just under the roofline, which is the key telltale sign. Number 3, you could have commented on the shape of the house. It's taller with the 3 stories and rectangular shaped. Number 4, it has the balanced symmetrical facade, something in common with all the colonial architectural styles. Number 5, look at the front door. It has the fanlight just above it and the side lights either side. And finally, you could comment on the tall, narrow windows. And these ones have a decorative brick lintel above them with a keystone in the middle. Secondly, here's an image of a modern house built in the style of a Federal Colonial. If you were showing this house to buyers, or if you were touring this home on a listing, what are the key features you'd comment on that identify this property as a Federal Colonial? So here are some things you could have mentioned. Number one, the muted colour palette. In fact, this pale green was a very popular Federal Colonial choice. At number two, the tall, narrow windows. And in this image, they look to be double hung as well. So you get extra points for authenticity on that. Number three, the subtle wall panelling. Number four, crown moulding. And although we can't actually see it in this image, there's a fair chance there's a ceiling medallion framing that central chandelier that's hanging. And finally, of course, the fireplace is the focal point with the carved marble surround. So how did you do? I hope you're now an expert on Federal Colonials. Don't forget to check out my other videos on early colonials and Georgian colonials, and I'll see you next time.